This is the world's heavyweight title. And when I say this, I mean it in all sincerity. The world's heavyweight title, held by Harley Race. Not once, but twice. Over half of my life devoted to what I do better than any other human being in wrestling. I am not going to allow any human being to insult me or this. And when I say that, I mean it in dead sincerity. When I walk in that ring, I'm walking in there as world's heavyweight champion. I'm walking in there to defend what I hold probably more close than any other man has ever held. This is my life.
Fans, right here, the world's heavyweight champion, Ric Flair. And Rick, there's always something that separates the champ from the rest of us, and I think it must be money when I look at you.
There's another expression that goes something like that, but it's called, there's always something that separates the men from the boys. Now, I've been traveling around the world, and everywhere I go, they're saying that Dusty Rhodes is in the Mid-Atlantic area hollering, where's Ric Flair? Where's the world champion? Why does he come out here and stand face to face with me and talk about Starrcade? Well, I tell you what, Big Dust, the world champion, and you can say that right, brother, the world champion, Slick Rick, whatever you want to call me, has been traveling from one end of this world to the other, upholding the honor and the dignity, of the National Wrestling Alliance. That's right, Ric Flair, the world heavyweight champion, has been doing it better than any man alive. You know why? Because I'm better than any man alive, and this says so. Custom made, from head to toe.
Hey, where's Dusty Rhodes? Look at, he's watching you.
I see him back there. All right, Big Dust. You saw me a minute ago. Now it's my turn to talk and your turn to listen. You know, there's three things that Ric Flair has always had a fancy for. Big, long cars, fine-looking women, and lots of money in my pocket. $1 million. Think about it, Dusty Rhodes. All of you out there, think about it. $1 million. And this, you see, this is what cranks me up. This is what motivates me. This is what drives the women wild. I like walking to the airport having them say, here comes Slick Rick. And they're also going to say, there's the man that beat the dream for $1 million.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
It doesn't matter what you think.
Shit.
You didn't say that. Tell me you did not just say that.
There's nothing anyone can do, there's nothing anyone can say. There's little can be done right now to make this go away. Cliched simple platitudes do naught to quell the dread, and the breadth and gravity just send me crawling back to bed. It's useless in this moment to say we'll get through this somehow. There's time enough for action, but that time isn't now. Soon we can start planning for what may come to be. But what I could really use right now is a bacon roll and a cup of tea. I don't need positive affirmations, I need to scream and bawl. The unrealistic expectations won't help with this at all. This is shit. Well, this is shit. I'm not expecting answers because they're out of your remit. I'm not looking for solutions, just for someone to admit.
Backbone Wrestling Network, welcome to a new pod that we have on this feed. It is called The Shit Take. And I am Shawn Kidd, your host, and I am joined by one of my favorite people, Keith Langston, who you guys have probably heard on Greetings from Allentown, and he's also got his own pod over on the North-South feed, a la carte with Keith. Which is also an amazing listen. But Keith, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well. I'm actually excited to talk about this show concept here, and couldn't think of anyone better to join me based on what we actually met. So
this is a great concept because although I don't know how many of them we're going to differ on, so we'll see.
well, I think okay. So let me give some content about where this came from. So long before I even knew Keith, and before I think you were even like part of like the Place to Be Nation officially, when I first came into the group, I was kind of known as a king of the shit takes because people would love certain things, and I'd just like basically shit all over them with my view. And one of those famous ones, obviously, being the WrestleMania 3 match with Savage versus Steamboat, which is so you're very familiar with how I feel about that one, and I figured, okay, if we're gonna do a pod about this, I probably won't touch on that one because that's kind of old hat. But the real thing is, when I met you, it was in SummerSlam of 2023, right? When we met,
correct,
and we were sitting at, I guess, one of the pre-gaming things before we went to SummerSlam, and I was drinking beer, and we were talking, and we started talking about WrestleMania 3, and then somehow it pivoted to Ron Garvin, which is another one of my shit takes about how much I love Ron Garvin. And then you proceeded to talk about the Road Warriors, which we won't spoil that. We're going to go into the Road Warriors a little bit tonight. But it had me thinking, it's like you and I tend to agree on stuff, but then we push back on each other and kind of, I just thought you'd be a fun one to kind of go at it a little bit and talk through it. And I remember when we were at SummerSlam and we were talking to Scott, and Chris Colo was getting all mad at us about Road Warriors. So anyway, go ahead, Keith. I just wanted to set it up for everybody.
No, but it's true. I mean, I think as quickly as the friendship began, it was going to end when I told you how I thought that Ronnie Garvin was the biggest piece of shit in the planet. And you were just like, how dare you? And I went, how dare I? How dare they put the NWA title on him? So, yeah. I mean, it was a take. It was a take nonetheless.
It was a take. You know what's even funnier is how we went to the Greek restaurant he had his world title celebration dinner at, which made it even better. So that always stood out with me. Is I ate the restaurant Ryan Garvin had the world title celebration at.
You kept bringing that up to me. You were like, Ronnie Garvin celebrated his NWA victory here. I was like, who cares?
So a friendship was born from there, and here we are tonight. So here's the deal. So the way this show is going to work is I'm going to pick one of my personal shit takes. Yes. That most people would perceive as a shit take. And then you're going to share yours, at least for tonight. As far as the next episode, we'll probably alternate. You go first, I'll go second. We'll just alternate as we go through. So I wanted to pick one for me tonight. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we both sent some things for each other to watch based on what our takes were to kind of get our head wrapped around it. And if the other person was right, they were wrong. All right, so my first one that we're going to get into is Harley Race and Ric Flair, and who was the better world champion. Now, before I frame this up, Keith, what is your personal opinion in this without any context or saying anything that you had to watch initially? What is your thought between Harley Race and Ric Flair?
I mean, I think I probably go with the flow of most people and consider Ric Flair to be one of the greatest world heavyweight champions of all time, if not the greatest world heavyweight champion of all time. So, yes, I think in this matter, you and I disagree. So
okay, so we're going to jump right into it. Let me give some perspective about why. So I also was a fan of the Ric Flair opinion. However, so I do a pod called Territorial, mm-hmm. which I went down a rabbit hole over the last year watching a lot of old wrestling. And I never really thought about Harley Race until I did and started watching Harley Race, and I became obsessed with watching him because just how he was like all over the world, like, and all his matches were very different and diversified. Like he'd wrestle one style in Japan, he'd wrestle one style in World Class, which we'll talk about tonight.
Right.
He'd Mid-Atlantic, he'd be all over. I mean, both of them were both true world champions, right? No doubt about it. If you think about WWF. Mm-hmm. But Harley, for me, has grown on me, and just 7-time champion. Some of the people he's faced in terms of a historical value, and Flair has too. But you know how another shit take of mine is how I feel about someone named Sting. So if you're gonna put a Sting up against like someone like a Briscoe or something, for me, I'm an old guy, so I like the older stuff. Sure. I just really like Harley Race and think he's better than Flair. Flair for me is one-dimensional. And you always hear this thing, Bret Hart always talks about how Flair just has all these different moves. And he's right. I mean, if you really think about it, he has one style for the most part, doesn't diversify a whole lot. And when he faces all his opponents, you kind of get the same match. And you might get a one-off that's really, really good, but for the most part, they have the same kind of formula. So go ahead.
No, I mean, it's funny that, okay, so I want to agree with you on several points that you made, because having recently gone down this rabbit hole myself and having watched the Dark Side of the Ring on Harley Race,
that also kicked it in for me too.
Sure.
Watching that, yeah.
One of the things that I think is very prevalent is that Harley Race was a champion at the time that the champion had to be a bit of a shooter or a hooker or whatever you want to call it, because you never knew if the territory you were walking into was going to do business or not. And I think that that's not only that, but I know that there's always been this allure of the NWA Championship Committee that has to determine who the champion's going to be. And, you know, when they picked Flair to take it in '83 over him, it was like a big, and I think that Harley wins his first championship when he's still, I think, fairly young. I mean, you know.
Well, Harley's one of those habitually always looks old. Let's be honest. He's like an Arn Anderson. He's
right, but
yeah.
he started when he started when he was very young. So I think he was still relatively young in modern era to win the championship, which means he definitely had that cachet to carry the championship, at least by the way the booking committee thought, the NWA Championship Committee would thought. So you had to give him some credit there. I mean, he is, without a shadow of a doubt, probably second, in my opinion, as the baddest mother frigger on the planet, you know, as far as like actual men. Of course, first being the one true king, Haku. But I think that Harley seemed to be the guy that was a legitimate badass. And I think that goes a long way. What hurts him, however, is, it's funny. It hurts him kind of the same way it's hurting Ric Flair even now, is he didn't know when to give it up. And he kind of had a last, even as much as I kind of enjoyed his WWF run, it was still like, this is sad, especially if you were like a Harley Race fanatic. I mean, I can't imagine people in Kansas City tuning into WWF in '86 and '87 and seeing this and being like, really, this is what he's come to. And then on top of that, when he goes back to the when he goes back to WCW after his stint in the WWF, and until he starts managing, once he starts managing Vader and Luger, and that's when you start to see the next phase that I wish had carried on for a lot longer, because I think Harley Race would have been an awesome, like, on-screen manager for a lot of heels, and, you know, just had that awesome interactions with a lot of the guys who were in the next generation of wrestling. So
so I listen, and I think I also have a certain type of wrestler I like. I like stiff. I like it when they're, you know what, where it looks legit and it looks rough and doesn't look like rehearsed. Like, for me, Ric Flair, again, I'm a fan of Flair too, but you can only see so much Flair going up and down over the top rope, flopping down and coming back off the top, getting smacked in the head, like it's just the formula. And again, Harley, to your point, was also in a generation of shooters. So ultimately, for me, that's the style I like. I just think his matches for me were more diversified. But to your point, I think you bring up a really good point around neither one of them knew when to call it quits. Like, even as of this recording today, Ric Flair's in the news for a reason, because he goes to a bar and or a restaurant and starts shooting on his staff, and he's clearly drunk at 75. And Harley had his own hiccups. It's like he did not have a really good family life. The Dark Side of the Ring was, you know, hard to watch in some fashion, fashion. But, you know, the WWF run, so it's interesting. So that'll bring us right into what we're going to, like, the matches we watched. And I want to get your perspective. Yeah. So the way I did it was I picked two matches between these guys. And the one was to face a champion in the other federation at a different time than when they were world champions. The other one, I did it for a reason. Now, both matches, one was Harley Race versus Kevin Von Erich, and the other one was Ric Flair versus Kevin Von Erich. And it literally was within a span of a few months of each other, because Flair started out with the feud, and then Harley won the title from Flair, and then he just carried it on the follow-up. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing to see. Okay, how did they set it up with Flair? How did Harley close it out? Which one had the better match? And to be perfectly honest, the Von Erichs, I've gone down a slope on the Von Erichs ever since I saw the Iron Claw. So I was looking for an excuse to watch this match, because one of these matches, I'm trying to remember which one was really kind of, well, actually both of them were kind of highlighted for Kevin Von Erich in terms of his brother being the other pick or whatever. So, but anyway, so we'll talk about that. First though, there were a couple promos I played at the beginning of the show. and very different promos. Like for me, Harley is kind of like that stand the ground, to your point. He's basically telling you he's the world champion and you're going to basically have to kill him to get the belt.
Sure.
And then you have Flair on the flip side, in his tan trench hat. I call it the Keithy hat because Keith has that hat that he was wearing. So it reminded me of you a little bit with the hat. But he's more like cocky. He's more arrogant. And then Dusty's in the background. No, but he's like in the background. Dusty's like doing like his whole gimmick because it was to build the Starrcade '84 in the promo.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, okay, well, I like Harley in the promo as the seriousness, but Flair definitely generationally has the better one that sticks out for sure.
And
in that promo.
And I think that, and it's funny because I know we're going to talk about eventually when they both make their way into the WWF. And I mean, Flair has always carried that charismatic promo that I could see like a Vince McMahon loving and just thinking like, this is the guy. And there's no doubt about it. Ric Flair is a superstar. Like he really is, but he's a superstar. He's not a professional wrestler. He's a superstar. And I think that it also goes to your point where you could watch 1,000 Flair matches and probably he might even be the originator of the 5 moves of doom, give or take. And not that there's anything wrong with him and his style that he chose. I mean, you could go for days, and a lot of people, I think, talk about Flair in such high regard because he could wrestle a broomstick for an hour and it would be entertaining. That is true. But it's probably going to be the same match night after night after night with the broomstick, whereas you're absolutely right about Harley. Harley could do any different type of match, any different style. Clearly, even when you saw Flair go to Japan, he wrestled the same way. And it's like, I mean, even Hogan changed up his style when he went to Japan. So the fact that Flair got through his whole entire career kind of in that same style, it didn't really vary from much, is probably both an asset and a detriment to his legacy, because you knew what you were getting with Ric Flair every time he went out there, but you weren't getting anything different.
And also in our day and age today, where you could watch every match under the sun and watch it back to back to back, it was very different back in those days where you would just see Flair every so often versus like now you watch all of this stuff and it's all at your fingertips, and you do watch it back to back to back and you're like, Jesus Christ, Ric Flair. It's like nonstop. Like especially during the Crockett days, man, it was like just nonstop. If you go back and watch those in a vacuum, just back to back to back, very similar. Very similar.
Can I quickly make a comparison to how Triple H had kind of, emulated both of them? And I feel
go ahead. Yes.
Well, I feel he borrowed from both. And, it's funny. I read something the other day where somebody was like ripping on Ric Flair or ripping on Triple H about, because he's like, oh, you can't always copy everything you do. And the person's like, are you kidding me? You took Lord Steven Regal's gimmick and you turned it with Ric Flair and Harley Race. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? He was doing all that. It's regardless. But the point I was making, though, is that Triple H wrestled, I feel like, the same match all the time. Like he had the 5 moves of doom. He could go out there and produce the same match quality as like Ric Flair would do it. But you could put Triple H in any style of match you wanted, and he would be fine. And he would tell the story correctly, and he would sell it correctly, and you could buy it. And I think that's from Harley, because again, Harley could wrestle anything. And it would be, I know my good friend Petey Winston always talks about having a time machine, having the DeLorean at our fingertips and going back and taking wrestlers from the past and bringing them into the modern era just to see how they would do. And a guy like 83 Harley Race would probably fit so well in like 95 ECW, 96 ECW.
It's a great point.
Just because of how well he was able to adapt and how bad he was, like he was a mean man, and that I think is what would have been great to see him transport him in. Just like I would have taken like 84, 85 Flair. It's not really a time machine, but I would have put him in WWF.
I would Flair in the time frame in 83, 84 would have fit perfectly. Well, he would have fit perfectly into like the Bob Backlund era, like in that.
That's what I'm saying. Like you didn't even have to change him into eras, because even in the years, like if he had come over in 83 and he had been in WWF from 83 all the way up until 91, 92 or whatever, he would have fit perfectly as like a foil for Hogan, for Savage, for Warrior even. He would have been great. So, yeah, I mean, it's But that's my. I always love doing that. I always think that, especially watching those dockside of the rings, I always think of like, like I think of like, what if you took like 86, 87 Sensational Sherry and brought her to today,
Oh wow.
and just
Yeah.
like thought like let her get in there with like Charlotte Flair and Becky and let her get in there with Rhea Ripley. Like it would be awesome to see some of those women from that era come into this era.
You might have a future podcast thing there, Keith.
Be.
Yeah, maybe. No, and it's funny. Like, and again, we'll get into this the Kevin Von Erich stuff in a minute. But even with Harley, like in his title reign, he was defending the belt in the WWF at Madison Square Garden. Like he would face Dusty Rhodes. He actually had a title match with Backlund. Now on the flip side, Flair did too. So back then they were true world champions. So you can't either one for me. You can't go wrong. It's just a personal preference, maybe.
No,
but for me, Harley just pulls it out. All right,
I think you're right. I think that, and you just said like you just went down this rabbit hole of just like gorging yourself on nothing but Harley Race, and I think we've all gorged ourselves for decades on Flair, and it seems like Flair gorges himself enough as well. So it seems like he might be in a good spot right now.
Well, I might have a future one that we have to talk about Nick Bockwinkel in this whole situation too, but I'm going to leave that one alone for now because that probably would have been met with a little bit more heat. We'll go into that one maybe later because I love me some Bockwinkel too.
Yeah, that's a little heat right there. You can't.
Yeah,
we'll get shot out of a cannon the first time.
No. We'll hold that for a later date.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about these two matches. So the first one is Flair versus Kevin Von Erich. It's from April 1st, 1983. And again, we talk about the style. Flair very clearly coming into Texas with the barefoot Von Erich with his robe, and just a weird start. Like Flair just like stuck in leg scissors the whole time, rolling around on the mat, and he was doing his thing. But this match for me was like pretty just very formula. Like Flair just stuck to kind of his thing a little bit. Right. Brocco Lubitsch takes the ref. I mean, this guy always looks 80 years old in every match he's in. Just an old man. You get the Kevin throws Flair over the top rope, then into the post. Flair gets his ass kicked, and then Kevin does a body press. And there's a new ref. They count. They get the dusty finish, right? And they get the DQ. I don't know, man. This match was kind of flat for me. I just thought it was Flair kind of just doing the best of Flair, and I thought Kevin was okay. But it's like if I had to go like a ranking, probably 2.5. I was kind of disappointed by this one. I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, I don't know what you thought, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hot take. I'll say it's a hot take. I don't know if
that's what it is. I know how people feel about this match. I wasn't feeling it. I didn't feel it.
I like it. It's funny. I think all my feelings I have about this being kind of like a kind of match is a lot of it falls on the Von Erichs, and well, it's just
I get it. I
mean, and I think that there are people who love the Von Erichs and people who don't love the Von Erichs.
I have an opinion on a Von Erich, but it's about one Von Erich in particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's David, and anyway, I'll get into that a little later. But
right, and I think that yes, correct, David, but I think that you could see Kevin's working his ass off with this and trying to be a Kevin Von Erich in the style. And again, it's a clash of styles. So I don't think you're totally wrong on this. I don't. And I hate to say it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people look at this as kind of it has that allure of Flair going to, Flair's going to Dallas and Flair's going to be and not something that was always happening. You know what I mean? So it's, I would agree with you in this, that it's probably, it's a going with the motions.
Okay.
You went 2.5. I would probably say 2.5.
Okay. So, and the end of the match basically is not David, but Kevin threw Flair over the top, and the other ref Brocco went down. The other ref came in, did the body press 1, 2, 3, but then they got the dusty finish. David comes in, does a hug, blah blah blah. Yeah. All right, which transitions to our next match which is funny because it's the follow up to this match, except now you have a new world champion because Race has won the title from Flair, and he beat Flair. So this match we're going to talk about, Kevin versus Race, is from 6/17/83. Race beat Flair on 6/10, so 7 days after he beat Flair. But this is the follow-up, and it's very funny because you can literally hear Race bitch about how he has to do a stipulation because Flair from the last match, and he made it like a no DQ match. And I don't know if you caught it or not, but he clearly bitches about having to freaking do something Ric Flair caused. I thought that was amazing. I loved it. So it's very different presentations. Race is like you always see Race in that red and blue outfit or whatever. Like that's his like go-to. They like we said, over the top rope is legal, so good follow-up I think for the April match. So it's kind of like territory booking. You have what happened in the last one. The world champion comes back as a follow-up with Kevin. Much different start. Like Kevin was kind of hitting drop kicks and cross bodies in the first minute versus just Flair rolling around on the mat with him between Kevin's legs in that match, which didn't make sense. I will say this. Race did look at first like he was kind of moving in slow-mo a little bit. His selling was a little bit hokey, like he would do like that whole flopping thing backwards. I thought that was a little hokey. But I do love his punches. He's really, really good at that. His selling, like I said, is a bit hokey. And he's kind of bigger than Flair, so some of his selling is very comical almost, and I think that hurts him a little bit, at least a perspective in his selling. So it feels like for me, the first 5 minutes of this one was really hard to invest in the match. Again, and as we go into it, I got really into the match later on as Race just starts stiffing him and kicks him and just beats the living shit out of him. Knees and punches. Harley gets busted open. And then he just injures Kevin, and Kevin's on the outside, and then David comes out. And then Harley takes a swat at David, and then that just goes off the chain with David just beating the shit out of Harley, and really good feud. And so here's how I let out these two matches. This one for me was 3.0, but here's why. The ending angle got me invested more than anything. But it was also very clear, unfortunately, that you know who Fritz favored. You heard that in the movie. It was very clear. David Von Erich was going to be a star. And the way he went after Harley and the way they went at it was great. And so if I look at the first two matches, I think about, okay, the first match, I didn't give a shit what the follow-up was because it was meh. I wanted to see the follow-up to this match. And that's what sold me on this. So for me, Harley wins the battle in this one between these two in the territories on these two matches for me. I actually went 3 on this one. It was stiff. Liked it better. I mean, I don't know. This is how I felt.
Yeah, no, I would probably again agree with you on the star rating and say 3, maybe even 3.5, because part of what I like as well is the add-on, if you want to say add-on, but like the add-on of like Harley bitching about like, oh, now I got to do this shit, and then the beat down and the fighting between him, and I mean, it's just, it added more than if I say like Flair coming in and wrestling Kevin. It's like, that's all right. This is the monthly meeting, you know, with the NWA champions traveling. He's hitting Dallas this week, you know, and this is where we're at. And it was kind of like you said, it was more, you didn't care about, you weren't as passionate and bought into as the follow-up was. It's also kind of nice to see that 2 different champions each have the same issue with the Von Erichs.
It's great, right?
Yeah, like, it kind of leads to the whole, Jesus, did anybody like the Von Erichs besides the fans? Like,
it's very 2 different matches. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of my biggest problems with WCCW has always been the very formulaic of the person comes in, they're best friends with the Von Erichs, then they turn on the Von Erichs, and then they feud with the Von Erichs, and then they leave. It's like, it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. And it just, to me, that would have, if I was a fan at that point, I probably would have been really bored. I didn't like faces anyway. I never liked baby faces anyway. So I would have been, whoever the person is that's friends with them next, I would have been like, oh, when's this guy going to turn on him? I can't wait. So, yeah.
But again, I think it also netted out a little bit. And again, I know this is a separate subject, but David Von Erich was clearly a star. Like, he could talk, he could go, that's a whole nother thing. And it's like, what could have been in versus what happened in the trajectory there. But anyway, so net for me, Harley wins out on those 2 for me and how that played out.
I'll agree with you.
All right, so let's go. So this one's very different for me, which is interesting. So both men eventually go to the WWF, right? So I wanted to see, okay, you saw them as world champions. Let's see what happens when they're not world champions. They go to the big dog, and they both go against Hulk Hogan. And one of the things I really liked about Race going to the WWF, one, you brought it up earlier. Clearly, Flair could go in and be Flair, but clearly Harley couldn't go in and be Harley, so they had to give him the whole damn King gimmick, and basically they made him the King. But coming out of WrestleMania 3, for me, you knew Andre wasn't going to be the main guy for a while. They had to. So Harley was kind of on a roll a little bit. He was a former world champion. He feuded with Junkyard Dog, but could he still go? He's probably past his prime, right? But I always remembered when I used to read the dirt sheets or the PWI mags.
Yeah.
They would always highlight what a big deal it was when Hogan and Race would fight, because back
Sure.
then I had no clue, because I didn't know Race was this before. You know what I
This
mean?
legend. Yeah, this literal
Yeah.
living legend.
So literally, this is a dream match, probably in 84 or 5. This would have been a dream match, probably 2 years earlier, maybe, if they
Yes.
played it out. So,
Yeah.
okay. So listen, right from the start, they just stiff the fuck out of each other, which I love. Hogan clobbers Harley with 2 clotheslines, and one sends Harley upside down over the top. Harley's selling in this is better for me than it was with the Von Erich match. Like, he's selling like a madman for Hogan in this.
Yeah.
And then the headbutts, Hogan gets busted open really bad, and Harley has blood all over his head from Hogan. And Hogan doing the blade job was great. Harley misses a diving headbutt, and then there's a sudden roll up that gives Hogan the win. But again, Hogan, the bloody mess. I really liked the match. Race runs back in and attacks Hogan with the crown, which I loved. And the ring is just totally soaked in blood. Like, I don't ever remember Hogan blading like this back in the day, so this was great for me.
Yeah.
I actually went 3.25. And again, here's what I said. Unlike Flair versus Kevin, what happened with both race matches, I wanted to see the follow-up. I wanted to see follow-up to what happened in this match. And now, no matter what, I'll 100% go back and watch the Harley versus Hogan series, because there's like 7 of them you can find.
Oh, yeah.
Even the last one they did in '88 is pretty damn good.
The Saturday Night's Main Event?
Yeah, that one's pretty damn good. So I thought this was a fun match. So for me, I went 3.25 on this. So, and I thought it was a better match than the one he did with Kevin. Even he's older and he's sold a lot better. So I don't know what you thought on this one.
So there's this prevailing thought that when Hogan defeats Andre is when he starts to become obnoxious as like the champion, and just it's like that's where the power lies, is really like it's that's when it starts to be like he starts to buy into Hogan starts to buy into his own bullshit. I wouldn't say, I don't think it's really until he loses that championship that's really when it takes off. His ego takes off. Oddly enough, when he loses the championship, his ego takes off. Because I feel like if you had 89 Hogan with his ego, he's not dropping the title to Andre like that. Like it's he's not. No, that's not gonna work for me, brother. So I still consider 87 Hogan to be very manageable and willing to work and willing to do business. And this is kind of like a great example. As much as I don't like Hulk Hogan at all, whether it's the man, the performer, or whatever, I will say Hogan's matches 84 to 87 are pretty balls awesome. Like he's out there working. It's a shame that most people remember him from 89 and up, because he really is great in his first run. He really is. And in fact, probably the worst worked match is probably the Mania 3 main event. It's probably the worst work rate match, because I mean, he was even making Sheiky Baby look good, you know, and that's something. So this is a great match. I personally love their Saturday Night's Main Event match. And
me too.
One of the reasons why is because Hogan's not the champ, and he's vicious. And he's vicious on Harley, because it's almost like this is it's months after their last run together, but it's like the end of the feud. You know, it's the end of the battle between.
It's always great about Saturday Night's Main Event. The end of the feud would come like within months of the actual end of the feud, and they would just tie it up on TV. So,
right, like they stopped messing with each other in like the fall.
Yes,
and then you go to like the Survivor Series, and then you have this, and it's like that Saturday Night's Main Event is great. This match itself, I would you give it 3.25?
I get 3.25.
Yeah. That's about right. I mean, even go 3.5, because again, I got excited buying into this. I got really excited into this. Like it gripped me.
It was really good. It was really good towards the end, in the back half for sure.
And it's almost a match that's like 40 years old at this point, and you're still like, oh. So yeah, I'd probably go 3.5.
Okay. So I'm like with you. Like when you talk about Hogan, 84 to 87 Hogan is good. Like if you watch some of his matches, like almost all of his matches are freaking amazing, and he's got a good run. Even with Harley, and I'm impressed by Harley at this point, because he's well past his prime at this point, but he's still like he sold more in this match than he did in '83 for Kevin Von Erich. So
I think and one thing I want to say though is that it's not always Hogan's televised. I mean, I'll say televised in the like Saturday Night's Main Event or pay-per-views, because I know like the Garden, like Madison Square Garden, you could see all those are taped.
Yeah, the Boston shows, like all the house
Boston
shows are
taped.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, and the house show matches are so friggin' good.
they
Like
really are.
like I go back to that. I go back to the one match he had with Rick Rude and in '88, and it's like I know that he had that match with Rude. Rude hit him with the chair, and allegedly he was like, "I don't want to do business with this guy anymore." But that match was still freaking great. Like, you know, he really was working his ass off up until he lost that title the first time. And then I feel like the Hollywood bug kicked in, and Hogan's like, "All right, I'm gonna go make the worst movie ever, No Holds Barred." And then I'm gonna
He became
it's
Hollywood Hogan early on, so that's what happened.
right.
So
Yeah.
all right, so so far we're aligned in terms of how we think about Hogan, how we feel about the matches. All right, so here's one that surprised me. So
I know I'm dreading talking about this.
I'm really not, because here's the thing: this match actually surprised me a little bit. Surprised me a little bit.
Okay.
Because you're in '91, and you brought up Hogan's at his best when he didn't have his title anymore, and he had just lost his title at Survivor Series
Right.
by nefarious means to Ric Flair, to The Undertaker, and Tuesday from Texas. This whole time frame is really wonky. But this is a non-title match, and again, we talk about generationally, like how Race versus Hogan at one point would have been a dream match. Well, for me, at this point in time, this was my dream match because I was fully invested in WCW with Flair, and then he left, and he comes like, this is my wheelhouse right now, watching this. And we already know Flair left. You know what's interesting is the feud on TV, to me, honestly, better was Flair and Piper, because if you remember, Flair when he first came in was with Piper. He was at the announce desk, so they really low key played this match out as far as this being a feud because Piper took the priority.
I feel like they were really, they wanted to keep these two apart as much as possible until Mania. And that was, I think, what they wanted to do. And then which is hilarious. There's got to be other reasons. There has to be why this ended up being like not the main event at Mania. I don't buy Hogan.
There's rumors that the house show reports were the matches didn't go over well. And they didn't want to put it in as the main event. That's at least what I read in the dirt sheets and all that.
Yeah, that's what I read too. And I mean, you look at if you go to like Cage Match and you look at the history, it's all countouts and DQs, which again just goes to show that Hogan doesn't want to even friggin' job on a house show that no one's gonna see in Duluth, to friggin' Ric Flair. Like, it's like, come on, guy, like that's kind of what you have to do, especially since you're not the champ or it's a non-title match. Like, in my opinion, if it's a non-title match, the champion's going to lose because it sets up a championship match the following month at the house show. That's at least what I would think the rationale would be. But that's like, it's not going to work for me, brother. And that's kind of what kills it. And that's what I feel with the whole feud between him and Flair is like, he kills it because he's like, I refuse to do the job for this guy.
But technically in this match he did, without going into too much detail, he did do the job.
Yeah.
In the end, what we didn't see is they actually reversed it, like kind of the dusty finish, and gave it back to Hogan. But we did see the pinfall. He did pin him.
He did, but it's a dusty finish. I mean, that's another thing. It's like, are we really going to do this? Like, this is what we're doing. And that's where it's like, and that shit carried right over into WCW, man, where Hogan, like, barely, what did he lose? One match to Flair? Like, that's it. It's just like, it's the most ridiculous asinine thing that
he actually lost to Arn Anderson more than he did to Ric Flair.
He did.
Nitro, he did.
It's so sad. Arn Anderson had his number.
It was great. Actually, I love 95 before they went into the whole like NWO stuff. There's some good shit in 95. If you take out all the Dungeon of Doom bullshit, there's actually some good stuff in there sometimes.
You know what? I always say that all of 1995 needs some life support and just needs a rewatch because there's a lot of good
stuff in there. Yeah,
in both companies, there's a lot of good stuff. Even in WWF, there's a lot of good stuff too. So
absolutely. So anyway, so I guess this match, you weren't feeling this match based on what I just heard.
Not really, not as much. I mean, it's disappointing, and it's hard for me to get out of my mind space. I feel like I was able to do it with Harley because I hadn't seen a lot for Harley, in the past, whereas I've seen so much Flair Hogan stuff. It's hard for me to get by it,
All right. So here's where the real shit take of the night might come in for you then. Okay, I actually love this match quite a bit. I actually went 3.5 on this one. No, listen, this might be the shit take, but here's the thing. It's 91 Hogan, 91 Flair, right?
Yeah.
And they literally go to town on each other with the punches and the chops. They fight all over the floor. Hogan reminded me of his 80s run a little bit. And at this point, Hogan for me was cooked.
Yeah.
And I just saw some like highlights there of him, and I don't know. I just enjoyed it, and I liked. I mean, the surprising. I had no idea about this match. I've never seen it. And see Flair pin Hogan in '91, even though they did what they did,
Yeah.
was still good. I actually thought they did a really good job for '91. So I went 3.5 on it. So that might be the real shit take of the night, Keith. I don't know.
I mean it. Geez, I'm trying to think. Do I really want to give this?
No, be honest. Listen. That's why it's called the shit take. You
I
give
know
your opinion.
It's just yeah. It's one of that. It's that weird. So this is after Tuesday in Texas, but this is before.
No, this is right before Tuesday in Texas. This is right after Survivor Series where Hogan didn't have his belt anymore. This was no belt.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Right. Okay. I'm trying to think. I'm like, because he didn't have any matches as the champion really after Tuesday in Texas, because
Well, no, because it got held up, then they did the Rumble and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. I mean, did they put on a show for the Madison Square Garden? Yes. It's only 9 minutes though, which is kind of like shitty, because it's like
probably for the best in '91. It's probably for the best.
Probably, yeah.
I liked it. It was quick and it went quick. No stalling.
I did love, like, this is gonna sound stupid. I like the robe Flair wears in the beginning of this. Like, I feel like it's Flair's got like the powder blue tights on, which is the tights he had on the Galoob figure. So I guess that's like nostalgic for me.
There you go.
No, Hogan would bring it for MSG. Hogan would bring it for MSG, I think, and or Philly or Boston, or Los Angeles. I feel like those are like the 4 cities that he always brought it. And all right. In retrospect, I don't think again, we go back to like, this is 91 Hogan where he's setting his ways and he knows what he's going to do. Flair's it's so funny with the psychology of Flair's brain, just how bad he thought he was when he came in 91 and how and just, you can tell he's almost like timid, and so it's not 95 Hogan and Flair, because I think in 95 Hogan and Flair, they both had kind of a new flame under them, because Hogan was in a new place. He wanted to draw more money. He wanted to draw new money. And Flair
jobbed him all the time. Like, Flair had no skin in the game at that point. He was done. Like, and that's what's sad is Flair in '94, prior to Hogan came in, was having a really good run. He had a good match with Steamboat for fucks. I mean,
sure,
he was on a roll. And then Hogan coming in just.
What do you have? A couple matches with Vader? Even those were like great, and talk about clashes of style. Holy crap! So yeah, you went 3.5. Oof. I'll go 2.5 on this.
Okay, so there you go. There's a divide. So net to kind of close this one out for the Flair and Race thing.
Yeah,
it's a tough call because ultimately I think Flair had my highest star match of the night, which is crazy to me with Hogan, but I really enjoyed the balance of Harley matches. Like, the Harley matches had me more invested, more of, hey, what's the outcome going to be? And I wanted to see more of him, and I wanted to see more of his matches with Hogan. I actually wanted to see him fight David Von Erich, which I'm probably going to go seek that one out and go watch that one at some point.
Yeah. Right.
But they were both real world champions. They both did great in their roles. But I really enjoy Race as the diversity of his ring, like his ring work in all the matches I've seen with him versus Flair. So I'm sticking to my story. Harley Race is it for me. So I assume you're sticking with Flair. And it's okay if you do. That's why we call it the shit take. We don't always have to agree. So,
you know what? I think for right now, because I've been so heavy on Race. Well, that sounds like a weird statement. I have been so deep on Harley Race matches. Let me rephrase that. I will agree with you on this, and I think I will actually agree. I think you've changed my mind just by doing this little project. I think I will say that on the Mount Rushmore, at the very least, you probably would put Race before Ric Flair.
It's crazy, right? Again, I would have thought the same thing 6 months ago either, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, I think a lot of it is just historically, Ric Flair was our champion, like he was our heel champion. He lasted through so many, like 3 full friggin' 4 eras. Like he went through, old school, then he went through golden era, he went through the new era, the attitude era, the post era. I mean, he went through everything. I mean, I guess it's longevity, whereas Race didn't have as much longevity as Flair.
The Ric Flair's last match in Nashville era.
Where apparently he had a heart attack in the middle of the match. That's the new thing that came out. So Yeah. And now, in the last match, Ric Flair at the Florida Floramos or whatever. What was the name of Fiorello's or whatever the name of the restaurant was?
Yes, amazing.
Manager.
All right, so we're gonna hold on that, and then what we'll really do is on a later episode, I'll probably debate with you who's the better world champion, Ric Flair or Nick Bockwinkel. That'll be the real shit take. I can't wait for that one. We'll hold that for a better day once we get going.
Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal.
You know something, David Crockett? It comes time once again, whenever there's a great moment happening in our sport, you'll find the Hawk and the Animal and Precious Paul, the Legion of Doom's name, right there on the card. I'm talking about the Bunkhouse Stampede Finals. That's right, I made it to the finals, and I plan on taking that boot and all the money. Now, Warlord, Barbarian Ivan Koloff, stay out of my way. I ain't playing around. You don't want a piece of me or a piece of my brother. Tell him, Hawk. I just want to tell everybody out there in the wrestling world that this is our interview time. We bought it. We paid for it. It's on the contract, which is for a whole lot of money. And I could say whatever I want, whenever I want, to whoever I want. That nobody can take this interview time away from me. And I dare you to try. So what I'm saying is, bottom line, my time, I'll do with what I want with it. All right?
What are you really trying to say? Come on.
Nothing. Tell him, Paul.
You know, David Crockett, Mark Twain once said, everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Well, standing before you is two men that everybody talks about. They all talk about beating the Road Warriors. They all talk about the Animal. They all talk about the Hawk. But does anybody do anything about it? No! We stand here before you now, kings of the mountain, alone on top of the hill. Number one in wrestling today, the best of all time, the best of our time. And we sign any match that we have to prove that, whether it's a Bunkhouse Stampedes, whether it's your challenge, Paul Jones, or whether it's any loudmouth like Ric Flair or any of the other four horsemen. We sign every match, and we take them all on.
Now we're going to transition into the next one.
So again, this is kind of going against the theme of the show where one of us tries to present a shit take to the other one. But in this case, I'm going to present this shit take to the audience and let them friggin' throw their phones or throw their whatever radios across the room. My shit take is that the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk are not the greatest tag team of all time. It is not. And I am sorry. I will never, no one will be able to change my mind on this. So I guess my biggest argument point for this is the man from Grenoble in the French Alps, Andre the Giant. And the reason why is I go back to when Andre was traveling across the world. Andre was always the main attraction. He was the big event. He was the guy. Andre never had to win championships because Andre didn't need championships. But one of the key points to remember about what happens when a guy who's 7'5" or 8 feet tall, wow, how friggin' tall Andre was. What happens when a guy like that wins a championship? He never loses the championship. And in an age where we're supposed to keep kayfabe, and in an age where we're supposed to believe that these are legitimate people winning legitimate championships, there is no way Andre the Giant is going to lose a championship. Therefore, Andre never won anything. Like, he never really won championships to the point that he was like, he was going to be the guy who was going to be hanging around and coming back. And, you know, like Andre never won the NWA World title. That's the biggest case in point. How do you not put the world championship on the guy who's the number one money-making event around the world?
And he faced Race. He had a great, like, long match with Race in like '79. That's
right.
A good match, by the way. Check it out. So,
and it's not because they didn't want to do business with Vince Sr., because Andre was willing to do, you know, Vince Sr. was willing to do business with everybody to let Andre go for a while. So to transition this into the Legion of Doom, you have these two guys who were put together by Ole Anderson, I think, back in
Georgia.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he says, you two guys should be running together. Okay. They're two monsters. They're monsters. They go to the AWA. They go to the NWA. They go to the WWF. They go to Japan. They go all over the place. These are two guys that should never win championships because there's no way legitimately you can have anybody beat them and have it not be considered something's fishy going on here, you know? And my biggest point on that is when they came to the WWF. Now, you had, and I think what I had done is I had sent to you a couple of it was a match and then it was a promo. And the match was the tag team titles they had on the line when they were the tag champions against the Rockers. And that was on a Superstars on December 28th, 1999.
Very significant time. What was happening in that? Like it was also a significant thing that was happening with the Rockers at that point in time, which was really cool match that you picked.
The selling of the whole sale of the match is the split up of the Rockers is empty.
Yeah.
But it's still a good match between LOD and the Rockers. And the point I was making, though, is that the Rockers are a hot commodity. They're a hot story. And they had to have this kind of goofy ending where it's just like a big schmoz almost at the end where it's a collision between the two of them. And then that's how it ends. And it just, in order to sell that story, I mean, you could look at the Natural Disasters as a tag team, as a foil. I mean, again, I always look at this as they really got Uncle Fred to be the foil for the Legion of Doom. I mean, you know, seriously. But I mean, you had them paired up with the Nasty Boys, the Beverly Brothers, the friggin' Money Inc., the Bushwhackers. I mean, these were teams that were just not on the same level as Power and Glory. Like that embarrassment at WrestleMania 7 when they were wrestling Power and Glory. I mean, it's just...
By the way, as you're talking about it, did you like Power and Glory? It can be a separate pod, but I just wanted to ask in a minute.
I didn't hate Power and Glory. They were like a put together tag team.
Got it.
But I mean, Paul Roma had been in the Young Stallions. I mean, he was in a tag team prior to that, and I liked Hercules. Hercules' babyface run, I feel, is really underrated, but it's also really just mismanaged. I feel like because I think that they could have managed that so much better. I often joke with Pete because we've been doing like the 1988-89 we've been running through, and that's height Hercules. And I said when the Mega Powers broke up, Hogan should have just picked right up with Hercules and kept running as the Mega Powers.
Yeah, I separately from the Powers, like for me, I just feel like they didn't have enough time to cook, like build to what they were. They were just thrown together and thrown into these big matches. But I think they had. Anyway, separate thing. But anyway, I agree with you on that match. Yeah.
It's interesting though you bring that up because you know what I think that this is maybe another shit take, but you know what would have been great for the WWF in 1990 would have been like the Intercontinental Tag Team titles where you had like a secondary tag team title where you had guys who were, because then you could have done the original thing I think they wanted was they wanted Demolition to drop the titles to the Hearts and then the Hearts drop the titles to the Rockers, and you could have had that. And then the Rockers could have been the champions, and you could have had, you know, maybe them. They could have done so much more if they had like a secondary tag title. But again, that could be another discussion for another day.
I do many topics we could do on this show. It's not even funny. So,
but I do want to get back to just saying that, like when you had them in the when the LOD was when the Road Warriors were in the AWA, they really didn't have I don't want to say teams to feud with because they did, but it's just they didn't have caliber teams to feud with that were on the same level as them. I mean, that's one of the things where I say, like, this is they're the baddest guys on the planet, you know, and it's not a question of that they didn't have the abilities to lose to teams. It just looked silly when they would lose to a team because you're thinking in kayfabe terms, you're like, there's no way this team would lose. And that's where I kind of go down this whole road of you book yourselves into a corner by making them the tag champions. They should never be tag champions. And, you know, I think that a lot of people will say Andre's maybe the greatest of all time, but that's only because of how big he was and how just the attraction that he was. His work rate, he didn't, and that's a lot of it has to do with his body and everything, but like his work rate, he wasn't phenomenal, like really past like 84 maybe, you know, and it showed the same with Animal and Hawk. Like when they finally got to WWF, they were terrible. Like they were not that good.
I would argue with you they were terrible before they got there.
Sure.
Listen, here's the thing: the match itself, for what it was really about the Rockers shine, and and they just Road Warriors just had to be there and just do whatever they did, their power bullshit.
Yeah.
My I agree with you on the winning the belts, and like one of the territorials I did was about Buzz Sawyer, and then Buzz Sawyer's face turn. He teamed up with his brother Brett, and they're one of the first ones to beat the Road Warriors for the Georgia Tag Team titles.
Right.
If anyone knows the Sawyers, and if you take one look at Brett Sawyer, and you're saying that guy's going to beat the Road Warriors, you'd be out of your fucking mind. And so you made a great point just in that instance there. Now, what I will tell you is match-wise, AWA. So again, I watched a lot of AWA because it's something I didn't know a lot of, and hence my shit Nick Bockwinkel take that one day we'll cover. But I did a podcast on Place to Be called NWA Crock and Roll, where we went through the Crockett era, and the freaking LOD or the Road Warriors were a big part of that.
Sure.
And the promo that you picked, I remember watching this promo when we did that podcast because it was about the Rushes. And the promo's awful, awful, but it's very token like WWF, like just Hawk saying, "Hey, we got a song about can you spare a brain?" Or it was just so bad.
Yeah.
And their matches with the Russians, by the way, at that time was very bad. A lot of their matches I watched with them in Crockett were bad. The only good match they had good matches with the Midnight Express, things like that.
Right.
But for me, watching that and then watching some of their AWA stuff, they were really good in the AWA.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it was about who you put them in the ring with. Like, as much as people,
were like with the Fabulous Ones and the Freebirds and stuff like that. I know.
Yeah, but even more so, people shit on Greg Gagne all the time. Him and Jim Brunzell are a pretty damn good team. And watching those two sell for the Road Warriors, and I mean, it's one, it's funny as shit, but two, they actually carry the Road Warriors to some pretty good matches. And so this also goes back to your other point about them losing to people. They end up losing the tag team titles to Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal, who Mr. Electricity, who at the time
not the good Steve Regal.
No, Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal, and Jimmy Garvin is who they lose the belts to, right? So then you transition into the NWA where they don't win the belts for a long time, right?
Right.
Which makes total sense. Like I thought the moment was probably good, and they went to Japan. They won the tag team titles in Japan.
Yeah.
But then you transition to where they start feuding with the Horsemen, and in Starrcade '87, everyone thought they were going to win the belts there. They did not.
Yep.
Which was good. So I think they booked them smart from there because they didn't win any of the belts until they did that heel turn and they won them for the Midnight Express, and then they booked themselves into a corner again in that moment.
So maybe my actual shit take should change as well to maybe not that the World Warriors are not the best, but maybe the Road Warriors should never be tag champions.
But they're not the best because here's why. No, they're not. They're 100% not. Like I think they're okay. So here's my Steamboat Savage take coming into the shit take pod. I'm going to try to make it happen at least once a pod. I think they are the best tag team perceived in the moment that they were hot. Like Savage Steamboat in '87 in a vacuum is probably one of the best matches you've ever seen. In 1986, '87, the Road Warriors are probably one of the best tag teams you've ever seen, or even in '84, '85.
Okay.
But when you extend from there, and then you really think you brought it up, hey, you could have an Intercontinental Tag Team title. Guess what? Think about some of the teams you would have had in that. So long term, you had the Brainbusters, even Demolition. I mean, part of the separation Demolition is better than their fucking Road Warriors.
I was just gonna say I have gone this far into this rant without mentioning my favorite tag team of all time.
I'm stunned that has not come out yet. Like I was waiting for that.
Yes, it's. I mean, I saw them at when I went to WrestleCon Mania weekend. I was like, oh, I was in awe when I saw the two of them, and I just went, hey, you know what? You guys are the greatest tag team of all time. Forget what people say about the Road Warriors. And it was great because Bill Eadie looks at me and he goes, hey, they're our friends. I was like, that's fine, man. I'm glad you guys got along and we're okay on the road together. It doesn't matter. Your matches are
But their matches were shit against the Road Warriors. And then you transition into the freaking Demolition 2.0 because, you know, Axe can't wrestle anymore. Yeah.
You know, reasons, whatever reason.
Yeah.
But again, okay, here we go. Demolition fought the Brainbusters. So they fought Tully and Arn.
Just run the gamut on this. Just go.
Unbelievable matches against them, right?
Yes.
They made Andre look silly. I know it's Andre, it's late stage Andre, but still, Andre and
Haku Andre, that wasn't a bad match.
That pop at WrestleMania 6, bigger than any pop Demolition ever. I mean, Legion of Doom ever got in WWE.
100%. Yep.
Them versus Strike Force was amazing at WrestleMania 4. It's the one match at WrestleMania 4 that everybody talks about, aside from DiBiase and Savage. Yep. But still, I mean, you had them against the Hearts, before the tag title change, when they were still, them against the Bolsheviks, not the Bolsheviks, the Powers of Pain, of Pain who were brought into the NWA to feud with the Road Warriors,
and Demolition had better matches with them.
Yes, and Demolition had better matches with everybody you could put. Demolition had better matches with the Rockers. They had better matches with everybody that they had.
The Killer Bees, the fucking Killer Bees.
Yes, I mean that's the thing it's crazy. Is you can look at that entire tag team match at 88 and go, every team that wrestles against Demolition had great matches with them. The LOD, it was very cut and dry. If it wasn't a squash match, it was a little bit better than a squash. I mean, I don't even want to say there was a heat segment really. I would have loved to have seen Demolition take on like the Freebirds or take on the Midnights or the Rock and Rolls, and just to see where they went with them, because I think that should have been the team that got to travel across the territories and be the team that, in my opinion, not the Road Warriors.
So I'll go even beyond Demolition. A lot of the teams you named, I would also consider better than the Road Warriors too.
Sure. I don't think you're right. When I hear greatest tag team lists and people put them in the top 25, I'm like, seriously? I'm like, there's 1,000, and I'm not even talking about their pathetic returns in like the Attitude Era when they went up against like the Road Warriors, not the Road Dogg and Jesse, the New Age Outlaws, and then they went up against the Headbangers and shit. No, like the Head Shrinkers, the Samoan SWAT team was better than that.
The Midnight Express, like if you want to even go back to the territories, like DiBiase and Dr. Death in UWF, way better. The Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express,
Rock and Roll, both Midnight.
Yeah, I mean, some might even argue the Fantastics. I don't know, just saying. When you think about pure match quality and what you get out of a tag team, the Road Warriors are very one-dimensional. Yeah, I think this might be the greatest shit take of all time that we both agree on, just for the same exact reason.
And on top of it, like we mentioned them once, but like the Freebirds, like if you're gonna say that there's a team out there that's considered the greatest of all time, I would say that the Freebirds are much more in that conversation than the Road Warriors.
Well, knock out anything 1990 plus.
I know you're not a big fan of Jimmy Jam Garvin.
No, but they get really bad towards the end there. Like 80 through 89, I agree.
The original Freebirds, where even if it was just Gordy and Hayes, but I mean, you could add in.
I think Garvin and Hayes in 89, 87 and 89 was okay.
You know what?
It's okay.
I didn't hate them in 91. They were fun to watch in 91.
Oh my God. You didn't have to do a whole lot of watching them in 92 for fuck's sake.
Yeah, but they were fun. At least they never caused too much damage. They just won the U.S. tag titles. That's it.
Oof, so bad.
The U.S. tag titles was held by Terry Taylor and Greg Valentine, I think. I mean,
I thought they were a very underrated team, Keith. You want to do a shot?
Terrence Taylor.
I thought that Terry Taylor was the MVP of 1991 that people don't even know about.
Oh God, that's
but that's what we do here. These are all great topics.
You just did a nice coil on the front lawn of your neighbor's lawn with that.
I did.
Taylor, the guy's the fucking Red Rooster. Taylor and Garvin. How can I be friends with a guy who loves Taylor and Garvin?
We'll talk about Taylor another time. Garvin's a dead subject because it's been beat to the ground and there's nothing to debate. Taylor we'll talk about. I converted you to Race, but then again, Race is not Terry Taylor.
I can't wait till we have that long debate at a bar in Cleveland at SummerSlam where you talk about.
We'll make sure we bring up Terry Taylor. I'm gonna bring. You know what I'll do when we talk about Terry Taylor? I'm gonna bring up his feud with Chris Adams. That's a really good feud. We'll talk about that one.
Yes. That is the only time Terry Taylor is somewhat of a decent professional.
It only takes one time, but we'll talk about that later. All right, so Keith, anything else you want to add about the Road Warriors before we wrap this up?
Just that I think that Demolition was not a knockoff of the Road Warriors. The Road Warriors were a knockoff of Demolition, even though they came before.
I think Vince McMahon's booking of Demolition and what they did in the WWF was amazing, because when they first came, I remember when they first came out and I saw them, I was in my Road Warriors mode back then a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what are we doing? And I'm like, this is so stupid. And then when I realized that Crusher Khrushchev was Smash,
Yep.
and like, oh my God, he left that feud to go work in the, but it just worked. It just worked, and the booking and the teams, and I think the other thing with Demolition was they were both really good workers in their day.
Yes.
Like,
yeah,
they were both, and the Road Warriors were never good workers.
No.
Ever. So,
And no, and I mean, RIP to them. I know. Oh, the last thing I want to say is Mr. Fuji always cut a better promo than anything Paul Ellering would have ever done. So,
Well, Keith, I think we're ending this on a good note, this episode. So anything you want to plug before we end? By the way, so just to level set, I brought Keith to the dance on believing in the Harley Race take, and then we both 100% agree on the Road Warriors. So for two tonight. We'll see what happens on our next episode. But anything you want to plug before we go?
I mean, you can always hear me every week with my BFF in the whole wide world, Petey Winston, on Greetings from Allentown, GFA Live. Find that on your own podcatcher feed or whatever. You can also hear me on the North-South Connection Podcast Network with A La Carte with Keithy. And Hail to the Keith is the new historical-based podcast that has been out.
How did I forget about that one when I did? Sorry about that.
It's actually, I said to Pete last night, when the Bruins and Panthers started game one, I said, do you think when whoever it was that was doing the face-off, the initial face-off, leaned in and said, hey, you ready for 7 games? Because I said the Bruins should change their friggin' name to the 7-game series. And Pete goes, actually, I heard he leaned in and said, hail to the Keith.
That's amazing. It's an amazing, that first one you did was absolutely great.
Yeah,
so,
hopefully I'll have the next one out. Well, the next one will be out by the time this drops, so you'll hear that. And then always A La Carte with Keithy. You can hear every other Friday generally. And check me out on like anything else on the North-South Connection, Chronoso. I show up on Exposition, which is on the Jenny Position, the Formidable X-Men podcast. I tend to do that a lot. So yeah, you can hear me on those things. All
right, so now you get Keithy on three different spectrums. So you got you got Greetings from Allentown. Now you got him over here. So spreading the Keithy love a little bit.
That's right.
All right, so as far as me, obviously I'm primarily on the Backbone now, so I still do territorial. We also have a new one that we started doing called it's called Hidden Gem, and basically what that podcast is that Logan, Schiff, and I each pick a match we consider a hidden gem, and we all watch it, and then we either debate it or shit on it. Similar to what we're doing with our shit takes, but that was a fun one to record too, by the way, because it's always like all these different matches, and we all have our own themes of what we like and prefer, and it's always that was a really fun one to do. And then you'll have everything else on here, stuff from NoSo. You got Highway to the Impact Zone from PTBN. You got Ruthlessly Aggressive over here. A New Gen on a Mission's coming over here. Linking Up Luchas. So we got a lot. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Schiff's new pod. Are You Smarter Than Vince Russo's WCW? Which I heard the first episode because he recorded it and he put it in the drive, and that's definitely something. So a lot of good stuff over here. So please take the time and listen to everything here on the Backbone, and we appreciate all of you listening. And Keith, this is a fun first episode, so I look forward to moving forward, and we'll see everybody the next time we do it. Have a good night, everybody.
I'm right and you're wrong, that's the name of this here song. This discussion's gone on way too long. I'm right and you're wrong. They say there's 2 sides to every scrum. My side's right and your side's dumb. That's the general rule of thumb. I'm right and you're wrong. If I'm right and you're wrong, I guess this can't be a sing-along. 'Cause you'd sing I'm right and that'd be wrong, 'cause I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right and you're wrong, that's the name of this here song. Dang, you sure are headstrong. I'm right and you're wrong. We can agree to disagree on things you're just too blind to see. Else you just agree with me, 'cause I'm right and you're wrong. Please don't cloud the issue with facts. Let's just stick to personal attacks till there ain't no turning back. 'Cause I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right and you're wrong. That's the name of this here song. Civil discourse just don't belong. I'm right and you're wrong. What's that you say? Maybe we should listen. Maybe there's things we've both been missing. Heck, we could wind up hugging and kissing if no one's right or wrong. All this talking's gone on way too long. There ain't gonna be no brand new dawn, 'cause you're an idiot and I'm King Kong. I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right and you're wrong. That's the name of this here song. It turns out all along I was right and you're wrong. I'm right and you're wrong. That's the name of this here song. This whole thing's gone on way too long. I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah, the world ain't flat, it's just oblong. I'm right and you're wrong. And you're ugly too.